Well, again, everybody, and welcome back to another mobile edition of the davidTrig podcast of joy. Monday morning, here, just got out of a car wash, back to the office, and it got me thinking about grace. I was actually listening to a podcast on the Enneagram, and if you're not familiar with the Enneagram, you can go to enneagraminstitute.com or look up Richard Rohr's book on the Enneagram. It's kind of a personality test of sorts. And so the podcast, or this episode, the guys were talking about grace versus shame. And it got me thinking about how, for those of us who are achievers and artists and creatives, healers, people like you and me, we often motivate ourselves with shame, with blaming ourselves. I don't know if you struggle with this as much as I do, but it seems like my number one mode of motivating myself is to shame myself. And then at times, less thankfully, I struggle by shaming others, but by the grace of God, not as much as I used to even a year ago. But I definitely still battle the self-shame, the self-talk, the voices or noises in my head. I was talking to a friend yesterday, and she was telling me the same thing. She's a PhD, amazing educator and leader, and yet the loudest voice in her head is, you are worthless. Or, I think for her specifically, it's, why are others more successful than I am? Jealousy, basically. And the Enneagram, by the way, deals with jealousy. And so, but these guys in this podcast got talking about grace as a much better motivator. And I thought, duh, of course. The guy was saying how, I think he's a therapist, how some of his clients will come in and say, or complain about their husband and say, well, I shame him when he does this or that. And that's the only way that I can seem to get through to him. And then the therapist will ask this person, well, is that working? Is he changing? And she's saying no. And then he'll ask her, well, is that helping you? Do you feel better about yourself? And she said no. So then he recommended that she try grace. You know, I used to think that grace was ineffective. I don't mean as a theological idea, but I mean in practice, like practically speaking. To me, grace means letting things go. Grace also to me is the hand of God that took me out of depression, anxiety, and despair and set my feet high upon a rock. To me, that's grace. So I don't consider grace just as an undeserved love of God and the theological idea, which of course is beautiful, but I see it more practically. I'm a very practical pastor, I guess, practical person. And I think of it more as in letting it go, letting things go. So for example, now, the minute that I say letting things go, doesn't your skin just crawl? Do you want to let things go? When someone cuts you off in traffic, do you let it go? When someone offends you, do you let it go? When your husband or wife, doesn't kiss you goodnight, I don't know. Do you let it go if that's something that you really need or want? Of course, it's hard to let it go. But I realize that the more I let things go, the more divine I am. And what I mean by that is I act more like Jesus. I mean, it was Christ himself who said, turn the other cheek. Love others more than you love yourself. Do unto others as you would want them to do unto you. If someone, it says in Matthew 5-6, Sermon on the Mount, he said, if someone wants to take your tunic, let him have it and give him your spare one back home that you have back at home. Someone wants your purse, let him have it and give him an extra $100 and your credit card and your PIN for your debit card. It sounds ridiculous, right? It sounds impossible. Why would anyone in their right mind let someone walk all over them by letting things go? Isn't it better to look for justice? Are you a justice-driven person? I have many, many friends that their main problem is they're justice seekers. And so the loudest voice in their head is injustice. There's too much injustice in the world. My friends are getting away with things. Other people are against me. For me, I don't struggle with that. I struggle with shame, as I said. But Jesus' way, the way of Jesus is to realize that justice belongs to God, that success equals grace. And so, let me give you an example of grace and how I'm practicing this. 2 examples. Number 1, yesterday I was playing, did I say this already last night? I think I did, I don't know. Check out yesterday's podcast. I may have mentioned this, but let me maybe tell you a different side of the story. I was playing bass yesterday at my church, and my good friend, he said, hey, why don't you try this way or try playing it this way? And honestly, I didn't know the song. I couldn't see my music. I felt unprepared. He had every right to say, hey, try this instead. He did it very nicely, and we were just talking music. Well, I took it the wrong way, and I got super defensive and blah, blah, blah. Now, in my mind, I could say, well, I'm going to let him have it next time that he makes a mistake, right? Never feel that way? And this is where I've grown tremendously. First, that thought hardly even crosses my mind anymore, where it used to. And second, even if it does cross my mind, 99% of the time, 99 out of 100 times, I don't act on that. I instead extend grace. That's number 1. Now, here's another example that's even deeper. That's offering or extending myself grace. And here's where this is still a work in progress for me. So, as you know, I deal with high levels of feelings of failure and shame and some insecurity, but really it's more shame is what I've realized. And really, even more specifically, it's failure. I can't stand failing, or even the idea or the notion or even the hint of failing. I'm an Enneagram 3, so I'm very image conscious, very success conscious. I want to be seen as successful because it masks that maybe I'm just an average person and that really it's not about me. Deep stuff, I'm telling you, it's deep stuff. And so when I fail, like I feel like I'm failing right now at my current situation, I then blame myself. The noise inside my head is so loud that I can't hear anything else. I can't hear him. The only person really that gets through is my wife, by the grace of God. Speaking of grace, she is probably the only person that I give access to. Not even God, if I can be honest. It's not that I don't let God in. Maybe I don't. I guess I don't. Or maybe God speaks to me through my wife. Maybe that's another way to put it. But I probably should pray and talk to the Lord more about my issues of shame. And I have in the past, but it's not a regular practice. It's definitely a struggle for me. But my wife, by the grace of God, she gets through to me. Also my daughter, Canela. I have a sister also, one of my 2 sisters who also, I used to tell her a lot about these things. God uses these certain people. I have another friend named Ty, fellow leader, pastor, who also just through his words, he sometimes will just text me things like, I'm cheering for you. Just things like that really get through to me, and God uses them in my life to cheer me on. But when it comes to self-grace, what I'm practicing, or I'm trying to practice, is that when, like this weekend, I have felt so horrible, like I'm a horrible speaker and leader and just blaming myself. It's been bad lately. But today, I've been practicing self-love or self-grace just by saying, I don't really even know how to say it. As I said, I'm not really great at this. But I'm learning just to lower that voice by just saying the word grace, just by saying, just be kind to yourself. Like people often say, would you talk to others the way you talk to yourself? Would you say all these negative things to a friend, the things you tell yourself? Of course, none of us would, right? But so I'm trying to just practice that and say, why are you saying those things? Like, don't talk that way to yourself. And that's beginning to help me. And I know that it's helping me because then I'm motivated to love people, to get back in the game, to have hope once again, to give others perspective. Grace is magic. Grace really has always been my addiction. I love this book by Brennan Manning, one of my heroes, because he was such a flawed religious man. His last book that he wrote was called All is Grace. You should read it. Amazing book that really encapsulates my life. Am I a success-driven person? Heck yes. Have I always been successful? Yes. Do I believe I will succeed at my current job? Absolutely. Do I deal with feelings of failure while I wait for that success? Yes. What do I do then in the meantime? How do I pass my time when I'm not winning? How can you endure the physical or financial or mental trials that you experience while you wait for that blessing? It's called grace. Give yourself grace. Give yourself time. Last week I recorded an episode for young adults. So I feel like young adults deal with this times a million just because of social media, and everyone feels like they're already behind the 8 ball if they're not a millionaire by age 16. And basically I gave a few tips. You might want to check that out. I gave young adults a few tips. But the main idea was give yourself grace. Give yourself time. Forgive yourself. No. Give yourself time. There's nothing to forgive. You've done nothing wrong. Give yourself time. Give yourself time. Give yourself grace. I hope you can do that in whatever area you're being critical, self-critical, or maybe you're criticizing others. Give yourself and others grace, and you will surely live. Thanks so much. Have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you for listening to The David Trigg Show. Find the complete archive at davidtrig.com or subscribe for free through the podcast app on iTunes or Stitcher on Android.
Each week, we bring you a message of joy, success, and personal power in spite of fear, anxiety, and depression. Because as we like to say, though there's pain in the night, GOZO comes in the morning.